so we're finally here. It's time to make the final verdict on Pixar's win or lose. And I'll be honest, when going into this series in the first place, I very much saw it a little bit on the back foot. Being an original sports TV series made by Pixar, I was a little bit like, seems pretty neutral, I'm not that fussed. And then as we saw a little bit more how it's going to be a deep character exploration with an anthology series of everyone's different perspectives, that's a really nice format that I think is really well done and perfectly fitting for a series format, since long form means you can give more times to the characters, which is exactly what Pixar excels at. It just sounds like good storytelling. And then after that, there was the real big red flag that really put it on the back foot for me personally going into this, and that is with the executive decision to make some harsh last-minute political turns by removing one of the characters' and making them no longer directly trans. And I'll be honest, that does put a dampener on the experience. It clearly shows a disparaging between what the creators intended and the final product we got, and wherever your opinions are on that exact decision, it does affect the final outcome of intention and reality for this series. Another recurrent issue I've had with the series is the fact that it's 2 hours long. It's 2 hours and 25 minutes, I believe, which is nice. But when you're releasing it 2 episodes at a time, it becomes less impactful and memorable because all of the episodes are interlinked. The fact of the matter is, it's been a month since the beginning of the first episode review. But either way, before getting proper ahead of ourselves, let's dig into specifically episode 7 and episode 8 here, as to be honest, these are the 2 episodes I've most been looking forward to, for better and for worse. As episode 7 is the one focused on Kai, who is the very character who's had a semblance of their character removed. So, did I like this episode? Yeah, I think it was a marked upgrade from the prior episodes we'd been seeing, and definitely one of the bigger highlights of the series. While it's not so directly about Kai's identity, it's all about being a new kid that's only recently joined the school, and then feeling the pressures of the sport by having a father being so expectant on them, whilst at the same time sacrificing a little bit of themselves in order to make ends meet. Now visually, this episode is just as stunning as pretty much most of this series has been, and since each character comes with their own perspective vision that affects something in the visual effects department, Kai's example is floating up into the air when they're feeling elated and praised, and sinking into the ground when they're feeling terrible about themselves. And I really like this. I think this is one of the better examples out of all 8 versions of animation flourish that we see. I really enjoy this, but I also can't help but think when looking at this narrative, it is a lot again the first episode. It is again, another character focused entirely on the softball game, it's not baseball, I don't know, oops, trying to make up for the expectations of their father. One is a coach and one is a literal wannabe coach, and they're anxious because they don't feel like they're doing enough, even though in this case, they are at least notably functional, and they have some high praises to boost them up along the way. And I guess in this scenario, their parent is more pressuring directly with their intention. But it's weird, because I don't think that story was that well done, but I did enjoy this episode more than the usual ones. Maybe it just comes to the actual presentation and the directorial choices in the animation, or maybe it's because I was looking for something to bash on with this episode, because I thought there would be a glaring hole in this episode from the parts that got taken out. What we know directly was removed is specific lines referring to gender identity in this character episode, so it doesn't necessarily mean that this episode was entirely about their identity, as much as that is very much a thing that a kid could be dealing with that no one else knows about, and could be a very poignant and integral point of the mythos of what this episode is trying to display. And maybe the fact that this episode is a loop of the first episode is an indication that it's just been rehashed and recycled, or maybe it's a nice thematic thing that the beginning reflects towards the end again, and it's like, these characters are kind of similar, and they're more like each other than they think. But I think the thing that cooled me off on going to that direct approach is the fact that there is still a reference to that identity question, because it seems like there is a semblance of a scene that I assume got deleted, and they kept the end of it, for which you can dig into more if you want to. It sounds like the creators managed to work a way around still making that probably canon to the character without directly addressing it to upset the parents in the room. Because there is a scene of Kai sitting down with their father at the end of some conversation where they clearly say, "This is a lot, but I love you regardless." And then they feel elated on that.
This is a lot. Nothing can change the fact that I love you.
And it feels a little bit out of place because we have a high of succeeding at softball and then it cuts to a high of, "Oh, I'm affirming that I love you," back to back, and then we move on. But I'm glad it's there because it's not active fully as deletionist as it could be. And though we don't directly see exactly what it's about, it's nice to see that there is still some semblance in there in some form for the character. Maybe that's what softened me on it, maybe it's still a problem in its own right, but I'm glad there is at least something than absolutely nothing at all. And everything else I really enjoyed about the episode. After the series finished, I also watched the making of Win or Lose, and it definitely made me actually appreciate a lot more of the animation. I think I've said pretty consistently that the visuals and the directorial choices are pretty brilliant in a lot of places, but it really goes to show with some of the technological choices and challenges they had to face. Seeing those sort of hurdles they had along the way really helps me to appreciate the artistry that's going on throughout this whole series. Even if I'm a little bit more focused on the narrative than maybe I should be, it's a character anthology, you know? It doesn't matter where the softball game really goes. And so I think maybe with those combined as well, I was able to loosen a little bit more. It, of course, was never going to reach my fullest expectations, Episode 7. It wasn't going to be the best one, but it's certainly not the worst. It's not boring, like I would still argue some of the older ones are, but it's also not actively bad. Maybe it's just the visuals picking it up, but I don't mind it. Although there is also a notable gap about talking about Kai as a character from the behind the scenes, which you can probably read into those conversations were cut as well from the executives up top, but what we get as a final end result is clearly a little bit stinted, but I think is still functional and visually pleasing, and though I wish there could be more to see, I still enjoyed the episode nonetheless by the end, but I'll still always be on the side that tries to push Disney forwards, you know? The other real reason I was looking forward to this final week is, of course, the final episode, the one that loops it all together, brings every character into that final day at the championship. And of course, it does that in droves as well. The final episode is all about Coach Dan, of all people, the father of the girl at the very start, Lori, and his perspective through the week that then ties everything together. And it certainly does. 1/3 of the episode is the week before, 2/3 is the final day that we've seen several times over at this point. And I'll be honest, I really liked it. It was a surprising action sequence. There's all the great classic things of they enter into the day and you see everyone's scenes, but as the camera swipes through them all. And of course, it's always interesting to see everyone's different perspectives on the same event, or characters you've seen multiple times at this point, but not knowing their perspectives. Coach Dan in this scenario inflates like a blimp, apparently. I don't quite know. Well, as it is an odd choice, but fair enough. And yeah, I think it was a more than palatable finale. And I think it is a massive step up in comparison to the other adult-centric episode with Frankie, simply because it felt just a lot more poignant. He has his own growing concerns that he sort of bottles up over certain circumstances. He is a man of divorce. He's got a lot of parental expectations on him, weighing him down. These parents have been a wonderful antagonist throughout the whole series. You've got Kai's father here trying to be the new coach, getting in the way. And in the game itself, Frankie becomes an issue by going overboard on his defensive stance on everything. With Coach Dan being essentially the final boss of the series that everyone has to come together for, it's a nice exploration, although also kind of sad in some perspectives, like the fact that you learn that he's completely lying to Laurie's face when he's like, "You'll do okay, kid." Oh, you know. But hey, I guess in a sense, that just makes it all the more human in some places. Flawed. Everybody's flawed. Now really, this final episode, alongside Coach Dan getting more and more built up over the time, is all about finishing everyone's plot lines all at once. Laurie gets walloped in the face, which then leads into them getting an ice play. They get to move one along. Frankie is given another super defensive stance as he makes a controversial take and then gets his romance arc sorted. Rochelle and their mother finally make it back to the field at a later point. We come to see that Taylor actually running out is because she hears of her little brother being cornered, who both accepts their deal on their cliffhanger and then also tries to subvert the actual stealing of money that the older kids are doing. You've got Ewan being his depressive self, And then yeah, Kai coming in with a cliffhanger hit of the ball that then goes far enough for them to do a round in that moment. Although the run then also destroys their ankle even more because they've been pushing themselves in the training. That's kind of their little bit on the side. All leading into a big argument with absolutely everybody involved. The parents come crawling onto the field. Kai's dad shows up as well about the coaching side of things. And it all just turns into one big mess. Literally every character is a flawed person in some form. But of course it then does end in that nice sense of solidarity with the whole team and just playing the rest of the game with everyone's problems fixed or not fixed. In a sense, it's exactly the normal, standard, perfect finale ending you would expect to see from this. And I didn't hate it throughout this time. Maybe I woke up on the righter side of life, I don't know. I woke up a little extra early, so maybe I'm just sleep deprived. And apparently I woke up with a sniper's aim on me the whole time, but it's just how it happens sometimes. But what I really, really like about the ending, maybe it was an obvious ending point, who knows, is that after the arguments are settled and we go into the rest of the softball game. Hey there, thank you for making it to the halfway mark of this video. Come along and subscribe if you're interested in new Pixar reviews. I mean, you're not going to get any for a while now. The next Pixar project's months away. But hey, thanks for being interested at least to this point. Anyway, I'll let you get back to the second half of our final review of Pixar's Win or Lose. Is that after the arguments are settled and we go into the rest of the softball game, we scope down into some random signpost and we leave it there. Despite all of this build-up about the championship softball game, we don't even actually see the real results. It just fades out of playing the game for the love of the game, characters doing their character thing. The winning or losing isn't the thing that matters, as was like the very first line in the first episode anyway, from that weirdo kid that keeps drinking carbonated drinks. And instead, the series ends off at a pizza place after the fact, everyone happy-chappy talking, ending their arcs in different ways, and I absolutely adore the shot of them all putting together for a photo. They take the shot, and their fantasy, imaginative perspective forms are the version we see in the photo. If anything, I say it's far too short of a shot. It just clicks and it's gone. I wish that was like a steel frame that we ended on and slowly faded out or something. I love the janitor in the sides peering through the window. Maybe I'm falling for those classic traps. He also appears in the finale to help Francis out and all that. But I think as like a feel-good ending, it all came together perfectly to the point I would say these were the better 2 episodes out of the 8. Yeah, maybe it's just the series that has grown on me. To put it all into a nice little bun, Episode 1 didn't impress me for a multitude of factors. I'm not dying on the how dare this character be a Christian heel. I'm sure that was just some rage bait. It was just putting a layer of faith onto a demonstrably doubtful, anxious person. And the personification of the anxiety sweat blob I thought was a little bit unoriginal and not at all funny in their dialogue. Although after hearing that this series did take 4 years to make, maybe it's just an accidental coincidence that Anxiety from Inside Out 2 also existed and came out first. Fair enough, I just didn't find it that impactful. Episode 2 with Francis as well, I didn't really enjoy that much. With his visual aesthetic being the digital realm and the physical manifestation of armor on him, that's nice. I just didn't think it was very applicable. It felt a little bit outdated, and again, it didn't really feel like it was pushing territory in the way that Pixar classically does. Episode 3 was a real bump up, with Rochelle being the sort of businesswoman in a suit aesthetic and becoming bolstered up, tall height, integrating a little bit of the digital realm with the maze they've created, and very much not grifting, but grinding to reach their successes, I thought was a very good story to see, and visually was a lot more impressive than the prior 2 episodes. Following that up with then immediately their mother and the other side of that same timeline of events was really good to see. It wasn't your classic influencer jokes, which I appreciate. It came out a little bit more with nuance that I don't think I've ever seen in a film ever before. And was a super solid, above average couple of episodes. Come round to episode 5, and I think it sort of took another dip again. Ira as the little brother is cute, and visually I think I might have been a little bit too harsh on it. The 2D integrations are nice, and I didn't notice as much that there was so much 2D moments in a 3D realm. I think those are the highlights. When it becomes entirely 2D, it loses me a little bit, and I think that's just a weird personal taste thing of mine. I'm not sure. Perhaps I'd been a little bit too unfair there, because the animation itself, you know, it's good 2D work. I just didn't think it was that impressive in comparison to all the other visual effect flourishes we've seen. If it was more 2D in 3D realm, I would have liked it more. I mean, also, that manifestation of the imagination appears in everyone's example in the final episode. And in this part, Ira visually sees his sister running towards the older kids, and only she's 2D, walloping into them in 3D, and that looks really visually nice. And I think my memory just remembers more of the full 2D shots, which I'm a bit like, that's okay. But it's just switching an animation style rather than doing something creative on top of it, sort of. It's a different genre as well, I guess, sci-fi, but whatever. Either way, they didn't resonate with me as much, even if I've been a little bit too harsh on them. And then similarly on the Ewan front, I felt his episode was the biggest missed opportunity because it wasn't the version of the story I was expected to see. With him being so focused on jokiness at the start and being a little bit of that bad boy, I thought it would be more focused on gunning on fitting in by being funny. It instead became a romance plot, which we have already seen in episode 2, done differently, and the papercraft element was a cutaway rather than an integration in the 3D realm, apart from the occasional highlight of little guy appearing in their hands. And maybe I'd been too harsh on these latter 2 episodes, but I just felt they weren't as visually impressive as the rest of the series has been, which is the real highlight of the series for me. And I guess it's nice to get some extra screen time onto character-based stuff, so that's nice too. And then come round to the final 2 episodes, I think they do functionally tie it into a nice little knot. Episode 7 was not as bad as I was expecting it to be, because there is that slither of something I would hope to see more of that I think would have been the real highlight of this series to make it a more, I guess, just impactful in general. It would make a bigger impact and open some conversations and push the boundaries of what stories animation can tell had they actually kept that element of the story in. Without it, it is just a more generic, character-based softball story, which I guess is now all they're going for, but I think it would have been ascending beyond just a project from 2025 that people will forget about in 2029, that it currently kinda is. That being said, again, I really liked it. I'm a lot more on board with the visuals of this episode, and though it steps on the toes a little bit plotline-wise, I was on board for how the actual presentation of this story went. And then for the final episode, I love the direction they took with Coach Dan. The inflation thing's a little weird, but much better than some of the examples I'd seen earlier in the series. And actually fulfilling the championship night, bringing everybody together, is everything I could ask for and more. I love that we don't see the real ending of the sport. I love that final photo frame. And I love that we just end off looking up to the skies as characters move on, more deeply connected with each other than ever before. I've been a little bit of a naysayer on Pixar's win or lose, and I've also been a little bit flip-floppy week by week. It's hard to get a full read, because I think this series could be a lot more, but it's also not at all bad in any direction. I think it is still evidently clear that this project is made with some real experts in the storytelling and animation field. The visuals, when it's all mixed around and spliced together, are a real treat for the eyes. I've learned more about the technology of being able to transform giant mouth movements in that kind of turning red aesthetic. And the plot lines and characters themselves do feed into genuine human experiences from all sorts of the crew that makes this all the more charming and heartfelt when it does reach its certain successes. And for me to come out here and say, it's terrible because of one political decision would be a little invalidating, for the end product we got was pretty decent. Because it's Pixar, I think I'm always going to push for it to be more, but this is also one of the first real times they've gone for a long-form TV series format, so perhaps it's just a form of growing pains. Whether I'll actually be interested to fully rewatch this series again, I don't know. I think when the episodes didn't impress me, they really didn't impress me. More on a boring, neutral front than anything. But I get the sense that maybe I'm the unpopular opinion on that. The fact of the matter is, this is a well-produced show. At most, I would be up for rewatching, only for the idea of splicing it in chronological order for my own personal satisfaction. What can I say? I love these narrative time loop movies. But yeah, I think that is my final verdict of Pixar's win or lose. It is not the terrible series that some of my titles have been a little bit clickbaity before on previous weeks. And this week was kind of the make or break. Can it nail the finale with a good landing that puts everyone together? And does it screw up the most controversial episode in the saga? The answer is yes, it can nail that ending in a nice, nuanced way. And no, they didn't totally screw up this story. It still has a lot of length and depth, even with some of it shaved off. If it turns out that they shaved off the entire plot and rewrote it from scratch, then we might have a few more problems. But the very fact that there is a semblance of a scene still in there can bring with it that sense of impact and importance if you were one to pay enough attention to it. It's nothing immaculate, and it's not completely average. It's good. Or maybe it's just not exactly my kind of thing. I didn't even know what softball was when I started this a month ago, so what can you do? That's the British upbringing for you. For now though, I think I'm gonna finally end things off there. My name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this video. Do please tell me your final verdict on Pixar's Win or Lose. I'm really curious to hear how everyone else thinks the finale wrapped things up. And maybe at some point I'll put all 4 of these weekly reviews all bunched together soon, so look forward to that if you want to see it all in one place. But otherwise, I shall see you all in a little bit. Bye-bye.